Okay. Chair Mamato?
Present.
Mr. Zeltman?
Here.
Mr. Partington?
Present.
Mr. Walters?
Here.
Ms. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Angeli? Mr. Marshall?
I'm here, although in a few minutes, I need to switch to my phone, so I will drop off briefly, Chair, in about 15 to 20 minutes, but I'll be right back on with my phone.
Cool.
Mr. Grabsky?
Here.
Mr. Ladd? Madam Chair, you do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. And just as a note, I got an email from Gerald, and he has an emergency, but he will be joining us in about 30 minutes. Okay, so we have a quorum. We have a quorum. The agenda is up on the screen. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Okay. Everybody
Second.
in favor of approving the agenda, just raise your hand, please, or say aye.
Aye.
Good. Okay. Now we have to approve the minutes of the Yes, ma'am. What?
May I please go ahead and read the disclosure, please, about the virtual?
Yes, I'm sorry. Let's do the disclosure. Belatedly, but here.
No worries. The City of Fort Lauderdale will be hosting this meeting in a virtual format until further notice. The public can listen to and view the virtual meeting at fortlauderdale.gov/FLTV and on Comcast 78 and AT&T. You signed up to do so, please visit www.fortlauderdale.gov/VC meetings to sign up. To help ensure that the same decorum as in-person meetings, we ask that you please abide by the following guidelines. Please refrain from any behavior that is disruptive while you're waiting to speak. For the opportunity to speak, please mute the meeting broadcast on FLTV. And once you've completed speaking, if you will mute and may either hang up to exit the meeting or stay connected to listen to the remainder of the meeting. That is the disclosure that I needed to read in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to the agenda. And has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes of the previous meeting? Do I hear any corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting?
Yes.
Peter, would you like to speak?
I have several, and it's not because the minutes aren't good. A couple of my suggestions or comments are more and possibly in the nature of clarification. It is a complex area, and I actually do learn a lot by reading over the minutes. Page 4, the third paragraph. It starts with Mr. Partington, and then the last sentence but one, the last sentence, I think, third paragraph, page 4. Other issues included funding and overall finances, which he did not feel they have considered in relation to. Instead of they, I would like the committee. What I'm trying to say, I don't feel like we fully considered progress in relation to financial progress in relation to the report submitted by Hayes and Sawyer. So instead of they, the committee.
Okay.
Page 5. Page 5. We have. Sorry, bear with me a moment. First paragraph at the end, Attorney Spence stated that there is neither expert testimony nor affidavits. I thought that was more of a conditional statement. In other words, stated that if there is neither expert testimony nor affidavits in the report, it means these could not be considered in court. I thought it was a conditional. He wasn't making a definite statement. Anybody else remember that way? So I'm suggesting there But it says Attorney Spence stated that if there is neither expert testimony nor affidavits in the Hayes and Sawyer report, these could not be used in court as reason to deny a permit. Because there is expert testimony, I think I would say, in the Hayes and Sawyer. You want me to continue, Chair?
I don't know. It makes sense that the word would be if as opposed to not an if, because I remember the context of the discussion. He was talking about, could we use the Hazen and Sawyer report as a reference point or a touchstone in any recommendation? So it makes sense to me that it would have been a conditional, because he was not opining on whether it did or it didn't, but only in, if it did or if it didn't. So I would have no problem with that. If nobody else has any, I would accept that change.
Okay, thank you. Page 6, last paragraph, last sentence but one.
Pauline, could you go to page 6, please?
I think this one's straightforward. Page 6, last sentence but one starts, she further clarified that when. So I think there's a word missing. She further clarified that when impact fees are appropriated for a project.
Yes, I agree with that. We were talking about impact fees are appropriated for a project. The funding is not drawn down by revenues. Yes.
Page 7. Now this is a definite clarification, but I may be wrong on this. Page 7, third paragraph, third sentence. Just towards the end, there's a sentence that starts, Ms. Daniel replied that Fort Lauderdale does not use this accounting method. I thought Fort Lauderdale did use this accounting method, Anisha. So it's a question, is it correct to have the not in there?
What I was referring to was the methodology of, based on what Chair Mamano had mentioned, by specifying by project. So it's really not an accounting method. It's just a method of showing project to project. I would probably take out accounting.
What I was suggesting was that in order to account better for impact fees, you could do the budget amendments that appear regularly on commission agendas. But you're saying, just clarify again what you said there. She noted that staff can, Ms. Daniel replied that Fort Lauderdale does not use this method. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm a little confused still, but that's fine. I've labeled it. Page 7, so we'll just change that, please, to omit the word accounting. And then last one, I think, is page 9. Page 9, 7, item 7, brackets 2, Roman numerals 2. Third sentence. It is hoped that the project, which involved lining roughly 3,300 feet of underground pipe, will be finalized before June 2021. This is talking about work on redundant force mains being 80% complete. And I thought what we were getting at there was the two main trunk mains, the north and south projects, which in total are like 5 or 6 miles. And they're not relining projects, they're complete replacement force mains, large force mains. Is Omar on?
Peter, could you elaborate a little on that? We're on Double I,
On 7, number 2.
double I. Yeah, okay.
There, the third says its sentence starts, it is hoped that the project, which involved lining roughly 3,300 feet of underground pipe, will be finalized before June 2021.
I see what you're saying. That's incorrect. What he said was it was hoped that the new force main would be completed
Yes.
by mid-June, July. That
The
they
new-
do the new force main, but not the redundant force. But you see, they call it the redundant force main, but we think of it as lay people. We think of it as the new one. The old one is the one that's being relined, and then we have the new one. So yes, I agree with you that needs to be clarified.
That is correct.
The length is much more than 3,300. I think it should be 33,000 feet because the length of those two force mains is well over 5 miles.
Yeah,
That's about right. Yeah.
I can check up with that because that's the lining. That's not the lining in the redundant project. The new trunk line is different. So I can verify with Omar what's the total footage of the relining.
Now I'm confused. The new north and south is not a relining. It's the new.
No, it's not. That's the new.
Okay.
Yes.
So the work that's supposed to be done by mid-July is the new one, not the relining.
That is
so
correct.
what we need to do is we need to get the appropriate length of the new pipe and substitute it in for 3,300 feet.
And both the new large force mains, north and south, are indeed, I think, approximately 80% complete.
Yes,
and
that's correct.
When complete and when the flow is switched over, then the old mains will be relined.
That is correct.
As the redundant line.
That is correct.
All right. So that's the...
Somehow that part needs to reflect that, or at least talk exclusively about just relining the part that has been bypassed.
Okay.
We can get this revised.
Chairman?
Yes, Ralph.
Could we go back to, what is it, page 5 with the attorney, Mr. Smed's statement about expert testimony? It may be prudent to have him clarify what he meant on expert testimony if he's the one that stated same.
Well, this sentence is very specific and declarative. This sentence says that Attorney Spence stated that there is neither expert testimony nor affidavits in the Hazen and Sawyer report. So he is making a definitive legal, I guess, statement. I'm not sure that he meant to say that.
Okay, that's my point, is that maybe it needs to be, checked on the audio, or check with him to see if that's what he said.
And if not, it needs to be revisited.
Correct.
Well, then why don't we take a pass on these minutes? I mean, this is an important piece of information. Right. So why don't we take a pass on these and defer them until the next meeting, until we get a definitive read from Attorney Spence, if that is indeed what he said and what he meant.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to defer the minutes to the next meeting, please?
I move to defer, Peter.
Second.
Thank you. Everyone in favor of deferring, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We will defer these minutes pending clarification for the statement from the attorney, Spence. Okay. Let's get back. Yes, ma'am.
I actually had some corrections, but I guess since it's been deferred, then I can work directly with the recording clerk to get those updated.
Please do. That will. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Can we have the agenda back up again, Pauline? Hello, Pauline. Okay.
And the redundant line is 32,000, just saw the number, 32,130 feet.
When you say redundant line, you mean the new line?
Yes, ma'am.
The new line. Okay. Pauline, did you put that up or did I just put that up?
Just put that up.
Okay. Cool. All right. So we've approved the general discussion and comments by committee members. Okay. This is our open forum for members to make comments and to discuss anything that's on their mind. Does anybody have anything specific they want to bring up under this subject matter? I don't, because I think whatever issues I have is already covered in the agenda, and I have nothing to add to this. So if there is no more interest in agenda item number 2, and we'll go on to agenda item number 3, and I'll ask Pauline, do we have anybody from the general public who wants to speak on anything that's on the agenda?
No one has signed up, Madam Chair. I do have issues with my Outlook, so maybe someone did, but I didn't get it, but not from what I've received thus far.
Okay, well, that's all we can go by, correct?
Jerry?
Yes?
Jerry, our city moderator, are you able to see if someone has signed up?
Give me 1 second, please, Alicia.
Thank you.
Marilyn?
Yes, Jackie.
They hired a new public information officer, or did you see that today?
No.
Chris Lagerbloom hired somebody, not public information. I think he does the entire department, which encompasses a lot. And what I was thinking when I read that is maybe the city will now get some increased press, positive, on everything that they have done as it relates to infrastructure. More positive information going out.
Do you know who this person is?
They sent out his resume and everything. It's on the site. He doesn't
he's not replacing Chaz, is he?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, where's Chaz going?
Chaz retired about 6 months ago.
Oh.
The new person's name is Mark Fine.
Mark Fine.
His resume is all about sports, but broadcasting and all that stuff. So I thought that was interesting, but it looks like he'll be a great asset, and hopefully we'll get, as I said, some additional really good press for what the city has accomplished as it relates to at least infrastructure and other things.
Okay, good. And we are waiting now on the city moderator to tell us if there are any members of the general public. Okay, well, you know what? While he's looking, let's go on to agenda item number 4, old business, which is continuing business, which is our discussion about what our recommendation is going to be to the commission regarding a moratorium. I don't believe that we have any additional information on that discussion on this agenda, unless anybody wants to continue the discussions that we've had previously about conditions and pump stations or anything related to this. And we always come back to this. And I just don't think that at this particular agenda item, we have any new items that relate specifically to it. Would you agree with that, Anisha?
No, we don't. Not as of today.
Not as of today.
And we do not have the attorney on today as well.
Right. Peter?
So I think my question that we might want to briefly consider is, since we had this specific task, which the agenda highlights there, to do with a moratorium, whether there is any sense from the committee as to whether we should bring forward some report on that in advance of everything else and fairly soon, so that we address or we make a recommendation related to that issue, which seemed to be high on the Commission's wish list for this iteration of the ITF. So I'm wondering if I could foresee just going to the commission with something on the question of a moratorium. I don't know if others feel the same.
Well, can I make a suggestion, Peter? We have at the on item number 5 under new business, a work plan discussion. And one of the items in the work plan is, going forward, what are we going to do? And I think that that's the appropriate time to discuss that, because I want to talk about it in context with the rest of our issues and our mission and the amount of time we have left. So if you would just hold off onto that, I think we can have that discussion under the work plan discussion of item 6, because I agree with you. We got to make some decisions here.
Okay, that's fine with me. Yep.
Okay. So again, waiting for any information about people who might want to speak on any of these items. Moving on to the CIP forecast, line items 495 and 496. Anisha, who's going to take that?
I'm going to take that.
Thank you.
I know in our last meeting, there was some dialogue about us revising the report to be a little bit more user friendly and in layperson. And I want to tell you that we're definitely going to need a little bit more time. Our budget is due on the 3rd of March. And so we spent an enormous amount of time in preparation of our operating and our CIP budget. We've been having meetings with our assistant directors and our staff, but that has been the priority before us to prepare our operating budget and our CIP. I will tell you what we have included in today's package for you is some information based on the $200 million for the next tranche in 2023. It's a working document. It's part of our budget development. And the budget that we're going to submit to the budget office on the 3rd is the first stage. And we continue to have meetings, and we'll have another meeting in the end of March, and then another meeting with the city manager in April to continue to develop those budgets. But we wanted to give you the beginning stages of that document so that you can see how we had prepared that document, showing the $161 million of the $200 million of the next tranche in our water and sewer, and then about $38 or $39 million for the central region. So that you can see that there is an appropriation.
Can you put that material up?
It's actually, there you go. It's in the packet. And it's labeled draft because it is a work in progress. It's part of our development of the current CIP that we're working on.
So could you just explain what's up on the screen here? Is this the current 5-year plan or the next 5-year plan?
This is the next 5-year plan. You can see 2022 to 26.
Okay. All right. So this just takes the current plan and pushes it out another year.
It takes us the current plan and pushes it out another year. But what it does do is it shows, based on the question that was asked about the next tranche of $200 million, how that is at least planned to be expended.
Well, how would you know that from this document?
There is 161 down to the total, and you'll see the different projects listed. And then there's a dollar amount for each of those projects.
Oh, I see. So you would read this to say in 2023, we're going to have another 200 million. And that's what we're going to spend it on.
That is the working plan that we're preparing now for the next 200 million. And so you can see these are some of the projects that we've identified. Again, this is a work in progress. We still have to have a meeting with the budget office. And that could very well change some. And we also still have to have a meeting with the manager.
Okay, I can read this now. And then where was the extra money up to the 200,000?
It's the next sheet.
Next slide.
It's the next page. Okay. There's the 38.
Okay.
And that's 1496 Central Region.
Okay. And for those of us who forgot or who are new to this, what's the difference between the regular and the Central Region?
Central Region is Central Region is basically for those large users. That's the entire system. And then Fund 495. If you go back, that's the water and sewer. You see here it says Fund 496, Water and Sewer Regional Master Plan. So those are projects that are appropriate for the whole Central Region system. And then the other one is the water and sewer.
Okay. Does everybody understand this? Am I being dense?
That's your 38 million in fiscal year 2023.
I got that.
We just wanted to provide you, because the question was asked last time about the next tranche. And so we was just showing you that we have a plan. There is a document that's a part of our planning document working towards that. So that's just so you can full transparency so that you can see that is something that we're working towards. The next document, Pauline, if you can go to the next slide. This is the same document that you guys have seen before, which shows the $204 million of that first tranche with the 4.5 million interest, and showing the actual spent to date. And it's still only showing 54%, although we've told you that it should be a lot higher. But that's because the $65 million that we've identified as eligible for transfers, we actually have to go to bond council first, so it can be approved for us to proceed. And then after bond council approves it, then we'll go before the board. And so we're anticipating that we won't go before the board until May. After that, we'll see a much better number. But right now, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing $109 million of expenditures, of actual expenditures. And our target to get to the 85% at this point in time is $174 million. And so the additional $65 million that we need to spend will take us there.
You said something about transfer the money. What does that mean?
There are eligible expenditures and projects that took place in the water and sewer fund, or that took place in Central Region. And we use enterprise funds dollars to take care of those, but we can utilize bond funds. They're eligible for bond funds. And so we have to go before bond council. And so we can do an eligible transfer and then utilize those monies from our Fund 495 or 496 out of enterprise funds and move it towards the bond.
Okay,
so
but then
dollars.
Okay, but then what happens to the money that was in the enterprise fund that you were going to use for this? What does it get used for?
We'll be able to utilize those dollars for other projects, but it will require us to do some reprioritization.
See, what I don't understand, and this has to do with the whole issue of substituting one fund for the other. And we'll talk more about this when we get to Surtax funds and things like that. It seems to me that there's a lot of moving around of the funds from one type of funds to another type of funds, from enterprise funds to bond funds. And if that first $200 million, $204 million was supposed to be spent on certain projects, okay? And at that time, they were all enumerated. Now you're saying you're going to go back to the bond people and say, can we now not use bond funds for these projects? Use enterprise, or you're going to go the other way?
Right. That's all we're doing. Is because while we actually appropriated the full $200 million, some of those projects haven't taken place for different reasons. Some of them may have been slowed down for one reason or another. And so we still have to spend that first $200 million so we can get some arbitrage. And so instead of just letting the money sit there, we're going to spend money, or at least transfer money that's already been spent out of cash, enterprise, and then use it towards that. It's just taking money from one pocket to the other because we have to spend the bond dollars first.
Okay.
Chair.
Yes. Who's calling? Who's speaking? Roosevelt.
Yes, I just want to make sure that as we move this money around and we transfer from one to the other, that we don't allow the transparency to get lost. Because this is going to be even we can see what happened. Do we understand what happened? And the transparency is going to be in the understanding rather than the sight.
So it's full transparency in the fact that we actually have to go before the board and we have to identify each of the projects, and then there'll be a journal entry transfer of those funds. From my understanding, there was a transfer of $11 million that took place back, I think, in 2018. And so this will be the second transfer that will take place. But it would have to be eligible projects. I mean, the bond council has to opine on it to validate if the projects that we've identified as eligible transfers are in fact eligible.
Okay,
and once we add that 66,545 into the total expenditure, we will go from 54% to approximately what?
85%.
85? Mm-hmm. Okay, we are moving on pretty good. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand now. I think what you need to do is that you need to meet the requirements of the bond. A certain amount of money has to be spent in a certain amount of time.
Yes.
Okay. So, but you haven't spent the bond funds, but you spent other funds.
Yes.
Okay. And so the other funds you want to be able to count towards your required 85%. But right. Doesn't that leave more money in the bond funds unexpended?
No, it would actually expend bond funds that have not been expended, because you can see here only 109 has been expended thus far
of the bond funds.
Right,
but you spent 66,545 in other funds that you now want to be eligible to meet your requirement for the bond fund spending.
Right.
So where did that 66 million come from?
It's out of water and sewer as well as
enterprise funds. It's enterprise funds. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you're going to count those towards your bond fund requirement, okay, then you haven't spent all the bond funds, or you haven't called down all the bonds.
I haven't until I go before the board and they give us approval to do that. I haven't. At this point, I've only spent 54% actual.
Okay. Let's say this all goes, they give it its blessing and it all goes, and they say, yes, you can count that to what you're required to spend. Mm-hmm. How much more, then do we still have more money left in the first bond fund?
Yes, we will. I mean, that would only bring us to 174 million. And so we'll still have another 15% that we need to spend by the end, but they've given us some additional time to spend of that 3 years.
Okay, I'm just.
But we do have projects.
I know we got to spend. I know we have to spend the money. There's no question that we have, and we should spend the money because we need to do the job. Okay, I'm just want to be clear that we have spent the bond fund money. Okay, before we go and get another bond for another $200 million. Okay, and that's where I'm a little confused. Because if you're going to use money that you spent from the enterprise funds to meet the obligations of having spent the money on the bond fund, then to me, it still doesn't add up.
It's still projects. These are eligible projects. So whenever you go before bond counsel and you identify your projects, you give them a list of projects, and it's a plan. And so this plan has X number of projects that you say you're going to spend this $200 million on. Life happens. Sometimes those bids don't take place as well as in the time frame. Projects don't come in at the amount that we anticipated, but life happens and things change. And some of those projects, as you can see from this sheet, that we haven't spent money in those projects. A lot of the projects are out there already, but the money hasn't been expended for multiple reasons. I can't name all the reasons, but for multiple reasons. When we did the plan, perfect example, the redundant line at Force Main, it's not 100% funded through the bond, because when we originally projected it, we had a portion of it from the bond and a portion of it from enterprise, because that was the plan at that point in time. But we do know that it's eligible.
So you're gonna pay yourself. You. When I say you, I mean we. This is not a personal thing. So we're going to pay ourselves back for the money we spent out of the enterprise funds through the bond funds. Yes. That gives us more money. Doesn't that give us more money?
It gives us more cash, but it's the
more
same.
More cash. It's money. Okay. Now, by doing that, by paying ourselves back for the money we took out of the enterprise fund with the bond fund, now we got more money.
Yeah, but it's still, if you have $5, I mean, I still had 2 and I had 3. Just because I moved it around, I didn't get more money. I still the same.
No, that's not what you did. You spent 2, okay? And now you're getting paid back the 2 that you spent from the bond. That means you got paid back 2. Now, where is the $2? it goes into the enterprise fund. I don't say that's a bad thing. I'm not saying nobody's going to the Bahamas on the money. I'm just saying that when you start moving this money around, as Roosevelt says, you kind of get, even though it's all on this paper here, it kind of gets, lost. And it's not lost, it's there. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be in a position, or maybe it's not a bad position to be in, and now we seem to be awash in money. Okay? I don't, you know what I'm saying? I think we paid ourselves back the money that we already spent through the enterprise funds. Now that money is coming back and it's going into the enterprise fund, or is it being separately held for the next bond project?
No, it's going into the enterprise fund.
All right. So now the enterprise fund has more money, which is a good thing.
Right, because there are projects that were still identified on the first list that may have been held up. So those projects still have to be done.
Absolutely. I'm not unhappy about this. I'm just saying that what we need to understand is that we now have a little bit more money in the enterprise fund. The enterprise fund is not as constrained. Now we can either do more projects faster, add projects that weren't there. That's where I really want to caution. It's not, there is more money, but it's not more money for more projects. There's still, when we originally did that budget and we had $200 million of projects for the bond, and we had X million dollars of projects coming out of the enterprise, those projects that were paid out of enterprise, while they may be taking the place and moving over to the bond, there are still projects that were there's going to be left unfunded from the bond. I now need to either pay them with the next tranche, or I have to pay them out of enterprise funds. So there's still $400 million worth of work to be done. I appreciate that. And I'm gonna let that one go in case anybody else has some other issues and other questions, and you and I will talk. Peter.
Madam Chair, Anisha, on the specifics of the spreadsheet for 496, so you have a debit appearing on the second and third projects, if I'm reading this right, of 9 million and 5 million. So does that mean that those two projects are in a debit and you're looking to fund that debit out of the next bond issuance, the next 200 million?
No, actually, that's the same $14 million that's going to be applied to the effluent pump project. And so that project actually has some money, but we're going to need additional money. So there's some additional funds that we're going to pull from those two projects to fund the effluent project, the effluent pumps at GTO.
So can you explain that again? I'm not sure I understand that. So in order to
can you go to the prior sheet?
The 495?
No, I was asking Pauline, can she go back to the prior sheet? The prior page? Yes. So if you see here that $14 million,
yes,
that says 12529 effluent pumps and standby generator admin. So we're just taking the 9 million and the 5 million from those two projects, and then we're combining it in that project. That's all.
Oh, so you're robbing those two projects because you don't need that 9 million and 5 million, and you're creating 14 million for the effluent pumps. Is that right?
Yes, we're just moving up there.
And that is coming from the second lot of 200 million?
No, it's not. So
where is that coming from, if you see what I mean?
It's coming.
The bond.
It's out of, I believe that's out of the current bond, the current 200 million. And you can see that's in fiscal year 2022.
Okay.
The next doesn't happen in 2023.
Strictly, 495 spreadsheet and 496 are not strictly the projected expenditure of the next 200 million. Because there's some residue from the first 200 million that's being created to pay for the effluent pumps, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we were basically trying to show you just that. I mean, just to be completely transparent, if I was to show you the first one, there were some line items for 22 on 495 as well out of the CIP. They were only just trying to show you the 200 million for 23. Mistakenly, they left that here on this 22. That's all.
And then on the work plan, if you like, the spreadsheets for the second 200 million, are there consent projects on this list?
It should be, but I can't answer that question definitively, but I do believe there has to be.
Okay, perhaps you could update us on that at the next meeting.
I can definitely update you on that on the next meeting. We will be going back over our CIP budget, and I will be able to give you that information. I'm writing it down.
Okay, thank you, Anisha.
Okay. So when does this material have to be submitted as part of the new budget?
The 3rd. We submitted to the office on March 3rd, and then there are multiple meetings that take place over the next couple of months before the budget is adopted in September.
So we actually will see this again after it's been massaged by a couple of other. Okay, what's a good start? We'll see.
Well, we just wanted to let you guys see what the first step of this was churning out.
That's good. That's a good thing.
And to answer one of the other questions, there was a question that was asked last meeting about the a list of the developments that pay the impact fees.
Correct.
I did reach out to DSD to get that list. I haven't received it as of yet, but as soon as I get it, I won't wait for the next meeting. I'll just forward it on over to you.
That would be very good. Okay, and we also determined, did we not, that while they keep a good list of who paid by project, when that money hits the budget, it does not get specifically assigned to any particular project. It goes into the general projects or general spending. Was that what we heard last month?
I'm sorry, Chairman Mamano, can you repeat that?
Okay. While we will be getting a list of which projects paid what amount of money, so we understand how much money came in.
Right.
Once that money comes in, where does it go? Does it go into the enterprise funds, or is it kept and accounted for separately?
It is accounted for separately. If you recall, last month, I provided you guys with a spreadsheet that showed you from Famous how much had come in for the impact fees and how much for water and water and how much had come in from sewer. But that was basically what I was referring to earlier when Peter made the comment about accounting methods, because the method, while it does ensure that it is reflected that it is projects that are, eligible for impact fee usage, there is no one-to-one account stating this project is utilizing this much of impact fees. It's not reflected in our CIP in that manner.
Right. So there's no way to follow. Money came in, it went to this project, and that project got built. It's money came in, these projects were eligible, and some of them were using that money.
We know which projects, we know that money was used for X number of projects, but there is not an easy way to just say this project came in and this. There is no easy way to trace it all, but It is traceable. But there is no easy way to trace it the way that it is done.
But Anisha and Chair, I think you should qualify that statement and say there is currently no easy way to trace it, but maybe there should be.
And that's what we've had a couple of meetings with the budget office. I'm also going to be meeting with Susan Grant, our finance director, and speaking with our auditor to determine if we should modify how we do this, and just to make sure that we're in compliance, which we are in compliance. We know that we're in compliance, but if there's a better way to do this from a transparency perspective. So we've already started those conversations.
I think that's an excellent summarization of this issue. Yes. Okay, very good. Moving on to the next item. Does anybody have any other questions about this information? No, Ralph, Shane? Anybody else? Michael? No? Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. Pauline, if you could put the agenda back up quickly, or let me do it, either way.
So the next one is the Hazen and Soil Infrastructure Risk Map and Sewer Breaks. And they've done a really good job of showing the overlay. I forget who asked for it, but it was asked last meeting that we provide an overlay of the breaks with the Hazen's risk analysis. And that has been provided. It was only provided for 2019. We do have the 2020 breaks, so we can definitely work on that. But what we have before you is the 2019 breaks with the risk analysis for low, medium, and high likelihood of failure.
Okay, this is very good information, and I remember Charlie Ladd was the one who asked for this.
Actually, I'm really glad he asked for this. This is a really good document, and it really helps us to see where things are. And you can see here at number 8 and number 9 break, that's a high likelihood of failure area. And you have that break twice and right in close proximity right there.
But that isn't that one of the isn't that the new line?
Yes.
That's the new line.
Right.
Okay. Had we had this information, we would have known that the old line was going to break right there. Yeah. All right. So let's look for the future then. Look up by numbers 2, 3, 5, and 13. They all seem to be clustered around a red line, which is a high risk of failure. What's happening up there? Is that a priority area?
2, 3, and 5.
And 13.
And 13.
I can answer, Anisha.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Patricia.
So the areas of 8 and 9, that's the area of the south redundant line. And then the areas where, 2, 3, 5, 13, that's the area of the north section of the redundant line. And as well as, I think the 1, 3, or 13, that one's was added to the consent order and I think is already either underway or replaced already.
So that cluster up there was not in the original consent order, but after your work was done, they were the ones that were put into the consent order. Is that correct?
A lot of what's there in red wasn't consent order. Yeah.
Okay, so your work was good work, and it ended up being very useful and very right on target because that's a weak spot, and it got added to the consent order. So the process works.
And Chair, while we have Patricia, can I ask a question? Yes, this is a good presentation, but the base map, the Hazen base map that you're using there, is that the current evaluation? Is that a rendering of that? Because what you presented a couple of meetings ago seemed to have a lot more red on it.
No, it should. This is the latest update to the likelihood of failure that was in the enforcement condition assessment that was sent to the DEP. So in terms of the colors, it's the latest.
Well, just if I can be put back to the regular Zoom shot, the last plan that I had looks something, we can't really see it in detail. I'm just going to hold it up to the screen, but it seemed to have a lot more red on it. So maybe I'm looking at something older. Can we go to the Zoom presentation so you see me?
Pauline, if you can stop sharing, please. Thank you.
Can you? So it's back to front, like I am, but it seems to have a lot more red on. So I don't know what I'm looking at there.
Do you have anything more, like what's on the side there?
It says on the side, results summary, your score, force main condition analysis score.
Okay, so it could be that there's a likelihood of failure and there is a
consequence. Yeah.
And when you apply them, you get the overall risk factor. So it could be that's what that's from. I'd have to go back.
The base one that you're looking at as part of the agenda is the likelihood of failure. Is that correct?
Correct. The one that we just put up is
opposed to you multiplying the consequence of failure, the two factors together, and creating a different map. Is that correct?
Yes. That's correct.
Well, I have argued previously the use of likelihood of failure. As long as you're using the current state of knowledge about the condition of our force mains, etc., and using that as the base and plotting on the breaks that we're having, then that seems to be highly valid. Yes.
Can you put that back up again? That wonderful little map from the materials that we were just looking at? Pauline?
Thank you, Pauline.
Okay, here we go. So, Patricia, looking at this map, would you say that the current 5-year plan, the current SIP plan, whether it's being funded by bonds or enterprise funds, is dealing adequately with all of these areas where we have a confluence of the red lines and the breaks?
Yes, I would. And I feel free, Mr. Roberts, to chime in, but I think what you use this map for then moving forward is after dealing with all the red lines, we think about moving forward, because the orange lines are eventually going to turn red.
Yeah.
Based on age, and then the green ones will turn orange. So it's something that we want to continually plan for, the rehabilitation of the system, renewal and rehabilitation of the system.
Well, have you got any idea how far along we are in this process? I mean, how some of those oranges will turn red, okay? But I don't see a whole lot of 2019 breaks in the oranges. Am I reading this map correctly?
Yeah, you're
maybe 11 and 12.
You are, but if you look at like right where the line 3 is, if you go to the edge of I'm looking at the table, right? It has ID numbers. Look at line 3, 31519, and over to 172,000. Right there, there's a little red piece on the edge there. So that's a line that broke a number of times actually prior to 2019. So the only thing that you're seeing here are the breaks in 2019, but there were breaks prior to 2019, and there are not many, but I think there was a few, right, Steve, in 2020. So we're also dealing with breaks that aren't even shown on here as part of the consent order. So that little red piece is being replaced, and then the orange piece next to it is also being replaced in a future project. The little red piece is being replaced right now. Currently, there's a construction project ongoing, and then the orange one is being planned for right now to tie into the new north redundant line. So you can't only go by the 2019 breaks. There was a lot of breaks prior to that too.
So is it possible to, I know when we talked about this, Pauline and I, we talked about getting the 2019 and the 2020 breaks. Maybe that was the wrong decision. Maybe it was the 2018 and the 2019 breaks. That would be more illuminating.
Sure, I have data. My data goes back to probably 2016 or so. So I can use the 2016 through current if you like, and just update this map. And maybe instead of for each different year, the boxes, instead of being called out with blue, blue boxes with black numbers, it'll be a different color for every year. So it'll give you an idea of where the breaks were happening in what year.
Okay, I think that would be a scary map though, don't you?
No.
No. Okay. All right, then let's see it.
Okay.
Okay. Look, this is very good. How does this relate to our mission? Okay. Our mission is to report back to the commission on the condition and replacement of the infrastructure. I mean, I think we can say with some confidence that we know a hell of a lot more now than when we started. We have a lot more information than when we started. And it's getting, I think, into the form that is really useful for planning purposes. Yes, you wanted to say something, Aisha? Yeah.
Yes, actually, I'm liking what Patricia's going to provide. And what I would like to add for that is the CIP project. So that overlay that she's going to have, I want to put a table to the side so we'll be able to see for each of those areas that actually had a break and that has a high likelihood of failure. We actually show the corresponding project that's going to take place. I think that gives you a full picture.
That gives me some very good picture, especially if in that chart on the side, you show the ones that are funded, and there will be some that aren't funded. So that's, the plan going forward. So
I can definitely work towards that.
That would be
I would like to see that because that's going to help us to make sure that we have everything included. And then whatever is not included, it's apparent immediately what we need to do.
You probably would use this. This is going to be really good for you in your budget negotiations. Because when you go to your budget negotiations and you say, I need X amount of dollars, they're going to say, why? And all you got to do is show them this map. And you say, you see that orange one? That one's going to go. Do you want to be the person who didn't fund the capital project on that orange one up there? Good for you. Okay. So yes, Peter.
I definitely agree with you. But at a certain point, when, like take the force mains, which are the big force mains, which are nearing completion, at the point that they are completed and arguably the bypass lines are lined, then those will become green lines. So I don't see the point after that of showing the breaks that took place, whatever it was at that point, 4 or 5 years previously. That should all drop off this condition map. So that, and this should be updated as regularly as possible in case a cluster starts to suddenly develop. You may have a cluster pressure on, for example, on even a green line, which might be indicative that something has been missed, you know?
Well, you really got a point there, Peter, because what we don't need really just one map. We need a series of maps. If we had a map that showed what was the situation in 2018, okay, with the breaks, 2019, 2020, and those lines that now become green fall off the map, I think you would get a visual of what kind of progress we're making. Because the first map will be full of orange and red and breaks. The next map is going to be less full of orange and red and breaks. And the next map is going to be even less orange and red and hopefully fewer breaks. Okay, right. So you can actually see that we're making progress. This would be good for lay people to see it graphically that we're making progress, because lay people will not read, you know, the CIP and all of the things that we struggle with as lay people. But the general public is going to want to see a colored map that, you know, shows that we have made progress in the last 5 years and there are less breaks because we have less red and orange pipes. Am I reading that correctly, Anisha?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, I'm looking where we're going.
And I'm hoping, Chair, that within a couple of years, we'll see this map with 0 blue squares on it.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, Peter, as we say in New York. Okay. Do you want to continue with this? Did you have another map you wanted to show, Anisha?
Where's the agenda? No, that's it. That was it for the old business. If you want, the next thing is your new business.
Okay. New business. I'm going to put it on my screen so I can remember what it was. New business. Stormwater Master Plan Funding Alternative. Yes. Stormwater Master Plan Funding Alternative. That was, I asked to put that on the agenda. Do you want to take that one?
The first thing on your list was the Surtax project.
We can do that one first if you want.
We have someone, Tam, that's on that was going to speak to that. I believe Juan is still on.
I'm here.
Okay. It's not exactly in the order, but it's in the same agenda item. Am I correct?
Yes, it's on new business. It's from the one that I'm looking at is new business I-1.
Oh, then I'm looking at an old one because my I is Stormwater Master Plan Funding Alternative. Okay, you've got the agenda there. So yes, as long as it's in the agenda item, let's go do this one because this is an important item. And let me give you the context of why I asked for this, for the benefit of the other members. When we started this, we had a list of all the infrastructure elements that we were going to look at, okay? And we'll talk about that when we talk about the work plan going forward. But that list started out with water and sewer and stormwater. And we took most of our time on water and sewer and stormwater. And we did not do a whole hell of a lot on roads and sidewalks and bridges, okay? Other than a cursory look at the bridge master plan. We just looked at it. We didn't get into any great depth on it. So we have not really focused on transportation as part of our mission when it is clearly written right up front as part of our mission. But, things have progressed and changed significantly from when we started. Because when we started, all of the transportation projects were SIP projects, okay? Roads, they were all being funded by us. And we didn't have a whole heck of a lot of money. Well, even the impact fees, the transportation impact fees went to Broward County. We didn't get to use them on our projects. So we didn't really have a lot of money and we didn't have a lot of input into that. But things have changed now with the Surtax. So I would be happy if Juan would talk about how our future has changed considerably now that there is a dedicated source of funding for roads and public transit, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to just turn this over to Juan directly. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Marilyn. And thank you everyone for having me today to give you a quick update on the Transportation Surtax program. As Marilyn mentioned, my name is Juan Rodriguez and I'm in transportation mobility and I'm serving as the point of contact, which I think of it as a liaison between Broward County and their Surtax team, and then us over here that are going to be implementing these various Surtax projects that is awarded to us. So I want to give a little bit of a background just so that everyone's on the same page as to where we were, where we've been, and where we're going with the Surtax program. So the Transportation Surtax was passed in 2018. So it was a surtax that was passed by Broward County voters and started being levied in 2019. Back in September, the city entered into an interlocal agreement with Broward County that basically says, we're the city of Fort Lauderdale and we want to participate and receive funding for our surtax eligible projects. And then subsequently, we submitted over 100 applications for the various needs, as Marilyn was mentioning, various needs throughout the city for bridges, roads, sidewalk installation, and repair for a lot of these facilities. Since then, the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization, in conjunction with Broward County, ranked and evaluated each of those applications, not just for us, but for all the 31 municipalities in Broward County that submitted applications. And as a result of that review and ranking period, we were awarded 8 projects totaling $18 million for the next 5 years in both repair and maintenance projects and new capital projects. So what has happened since then is after that award, Broward County has been busy working on an amendment to that interlocal agreement, which was just the participation interlocal agreement that kind of stipulates what the program or the transportation surtax program is going to look like moving forward for the municipalities that want to receive that funding. And that is what Commission passed in January of this year, in January 2021. And basically that amendment outlines when we can anticipate to receive additional funding, what the annual applications look like, what are the criteria, what are ineligible items for surtax funding, things of that nature. So it goes into very detailed specifics on the program as a whole. What's being shared on the screen here essentially is a memo that was issued from Chris to the commissioners, providing them an update of basically what I'm saying, but also what the next step is. Since we have the Second Amendment passed and we have surtax awarded projects, those 8 projects that I was mentioning to you, and those 8 projects are detailed in the backup material provided to you all. Now we're at the stage where we can begin submitting documentation to Broward County. Broward County will then review that documentation, which basically is final cost estimates for these projects, scope for these projects, and even the draft solicitation that's going to go out for these projects. Broward County reviews all of those and then prepares what is called a project funding agreement for every single one of those 8 projects that was awarded to us for the next 5 years. Once that passes, and our commission approves that as well, we'll begin to receive funding and then we can start work on those individual projects. So that's kind of a synopsis of the timeline and where we are in the process. I know I don't want to speak too much because I want to give you an opportunity for questions. I'm sure there's a lot of questions on the surtax program and what that future looks like. But if you read the memo that's provided in the backup material, it provides a lot of background as to what I just said. and also current status of where we are for each transportation surtax awarded projects.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a very good summary. It's the best summary I've heard so far. So these are the 8 projects that we are anticipating getting funding for in the first 5 years.
Exactly. So they were ranked and evaluated. So they're the 8 projects out of the hundreds of project applications that we submitted, because we have a lot of needs. But they're the 8 projects that were awarded to us for the next 5 years. And they're in different phases. The majority of the funding we have available this year, meaning they're construction ready projects, because that's what Broward County said they wanted. They wanted quick wins. They wanted projects that were ready, that were already designed, and we can begin construction. So that's what the majority of the funding is going to be. However, we do have future funding for some of these projects, and some of these projects are either planning projects or design projects. So we have that funding available as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I noticed when I looked at this, the backup material, that 2 of the projects are bridges.
Yes.
And they're bridges that I'm assuming are the ones that we, high priority bridges, and that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But those bridges, as I understood it to be, they were funded previously in the CIP, in the CIP. Mm-hmm. Money was set aside for those projects. Again, here we have one of those, money goes from here to there, which I don't mind as long as we all know where the money went, and as long as we all know where the money went. So if we're not spending the money that we had already set aside for, let's say, the Ocean View Bridge?
South Ocean Drive.
South Ocean Drive Bridge. We had in the bank set aside $20-something million for that project. Mm-hmm. We are now going to be substituting that money with money from the surtax. What happened to the $20 million that was in the CIP? Are we going to get the next bridge done with that? Does that money just dissipate into the overall budget? What happens to the money that was set aside to do that project?
The one thing that, go ahead, Juan.
So I can talk a little bit about the discussion that was had at that level. What happened afterwards, I'm sure Anisha will touch on, but essentially the discussion that happened was that now that and similar to what you alluded to, Marilyn, now that we have this funding source for transportation projects, as transportation and surtax projects are funded, we can begin to reevaluate the funds that were attributed to that project for other projects that have priority.
That's fine. That's fine. That's what I'm asking you. Mm-hmm. Now we have some money, more money than we had before. Okay. As long as that more money than we had before does not end up in the general fund. Okay. As long as it stays in the CIP and gets reallocated to the next bridge that's going to fall down, or in your discretion, the next critical infrastructure project, even if it's a sewer project. I mean, as long as you keep track of it, I don't care. But what I'm trying to say is we're in way better shape. Mm-hmm. 4 years into the infrastructure task force than we were when we started. Because when we started, there was no money. There was no money for parks. There was no money for the police station. There was no money for roads. I mean, we had to put that money together out of the general fund. Now we got an alternative source of funds from the funds coming out of the general fund. I think we need to make that case going forward that things have gotten a lot better. And now it's really not a question of where are we going to find the money to do it. It's more of a question, in my mind anyway, it's more of a question of priorities, okay? We got this much money. We're going to do this project, and now we have a little money left over because we didn't spend it on that project. So now we're going to get the next project. Okay, that to me is the critical issues going forward, that's just my observation, and I am very skeptical of capital budget substitutions. You know, like when they did the lottery, they said they were going to use the money for education, and then they simply never allocated any more money for education, and they simply substituted the lottery funds. So I want to make sure that we don't end up in that situation. Peter.
So Chair, I think you raise a really good point, and based on my old time experience, there is a risk that when funding gets freed up, it gets fought over in the upcoming budget year for what are deemed to be higher priority uses. I know that there are a number of bridges in the city that are rated structurally deficient. They really should not have the loads on them that are currently on them. I'm really thinking that this committee should, in some strong way, urge that any CIP funds that are freed up by obtaining these surtax dollars, that they should be put back to be used in the for transportation projects in the CIP. And frankly, for bridges, they should go back for other bridges.
That's a position. Anybody else have any thoughts on this?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Roosevelt.
I agree with both of you, Peter and you, and you're doing a very good job in, I guess you're negotiating with staff as to how we do this money. But you remember we brought these same issues up under the old committee, and we need to make sure again that transparency is there, so that we not just staff can track the money, but I want to be able to track the money as well. So make sure there is clearancy and where the money came from and where it's going. As Juan said, what we did before, what we're doing now, what we'll be doing in the future. Well, I want to, if we're going to replace money with other monies, I want to be able to see what happened to the money that is being replaced. And the city manager, and one of y'all can help me out, they don't say delayed projects. They say projects that we're going to do them later, but not now. They was on the budget, was in the budget, but we had to pull them for one reason or another. Will we be using some of this money to not go back and find those projects that we had to pull that because we didn't have the money before, and not do those projects? And if so, will we be made aware of those projects that being put back into the budget process and ready to be completed or worked on, and so that we can track the money? You know, I like to follow the money. You know, every time you get in this thing, the people say follow the money. Well, I don't have any of my own, but I like to follow the other people's money.
Oh, thank you very much. Ralph, you had your hand up?
Yes, I concur with what everyone's sentiments are. we early in the stage of this committee, we were appalled by the enterprise fund being depleted for non water, sewer, drainage projects, and yes, I think transparency is the word of the day, to keep an eye on that we don't allow, or the city doesn't use enterprise money for something other than the utilities. And I know they've hopefully have refunded back to the enterprise fund the money that was deleted from same. So, but yes, transparency is the key here. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to ask Jerry and Shane and Michael if they have any comments on this, because this has been a recurring issue that the members of the board who have been on there for a long time have talked about, and this may be just the first time we're highlighting it in your tenure. You're all businessmen. Do you have any feelings about is this an issue for you, or is it something that would concern you? Let's get a broader perspective from the other members. Jerry?
I certainly agree with what's been said so far. One of the questions that I had first blush is, how does something make the list? I understand from Juan's presentation that the first part of the list was for quick wins. Okay, once we're finished with quick wins, how do we prevent is the wrong word. How do we ensure that what makes the list is prioritized as something that belongs on the list and should be the next batter up?
Exactly. So to touch a little bit upon that, in the Second Amendment that was passed in January by the city, but also proposed by Broward County, it details exactly what the ranking criteria is going to be for the annual application process. And they have a list of like 10 different criteria. The two main ones being how does it alleviate traffic and how does it add new connections? Those are the two main ones. And as I mentioned earlier, we submitted, and that was the same criteria that was used pretty much for the first application process. And every application cycle, we will submit our greatest priorities, obviously. However, we don't know how those are going to rank up against the other cities. And other cities, and maybe smaller cities, not because we're the largest, we contribute the most. It doesn't mean that necessarily we're going to get the most projects. It's all going to come down to how that criteria and the ranking criteria lists all the projects that are going to be awarded for that year.
What was the second one? Alleviate traffic and
creating new connections. So if it's, for example, if it's adding bicycle lanes, if it's adding new sidewalk, which are the majority of the projects. So a lot of the projects rank really well on that across all the cities.
Juan, could you also point out that in addition to these city projects that the city is getting funded from the Surtax, that there are a whole list of projects that the county is directly funding that are physically located in Fort Lauderdale. So it's not just these 8 projects that we're getting money for, which is a lovely thing. But Broward County is doing a number of traffic and transportation projects that happen to be in Fort Lauderdale that are now being funded. So it's not just that we got funds from the city, it's that the county got funds to do some of the projects the transportation projects that only the county can do. Did I read that right, Juan?
That's absolutely correct. So the Surtax pot of money that you get on an annual basis.
Right. So could we get a list or a map of all of the Broward County funded projects in Fort Lauderdale that are going to go forward in the near and medium term future?
Madam Chair, if I may interject, also, are there any state projects that are going to be included as well?
So, as I was mentioning earlier, and Marilyn, to your point, I will provide the backup for all the county projects that are going to be going underway within our city limits. I'm going to send it to Pauline and see if she can send it out to the group or include it in the minutes. So, essentially, within the pot of money that Surtax gets awarded, or with the Surtax revenues that gets garnished every year, 10% of that, only 10%, is going to municipalities. That's why we're not getting all these, let's say 20 or 30 projects funded per year. It's because there's only 10% of that going to municipality managed projects. However, Marilyn, to your point, the rest of the money not only goes into funding transit operations across the county, so we're actually getting additional Surtax funding to fund our community shuttle program. So over $1 million a year for that as well. But it also goes into county projects. So there's over, I believe, 11 to 12 projects within the next 2 years that the county will be completing within our city limits. So they're going to be county managed projects. Doesn't mean that we won't be benefiting from them because they're putting in that investment into our community, into our city. This doesn't include, there may be, I believe there's like one project that the county is collaborating on with FDOT, but FDOT has their own work program and their own funding that they will be completing. This is all county Surtax dollars that are going to be completed by the county.
But, to Ralph's point, I personally know of state-funded projects like the second ramp on I-95, the second ramp going on to 595? Yeah, 595 from Federal Highway. That's a state-funded project, but that will have such a tremendous impact on 17th Street and Federal Highway and stopping some of the backups and the congestion that maybe we should also include if we wanted to get a comprehensive look at how much money is being spent by city, county, and federal and state on transportation projects. Then we would be in a position to be able to say to the commission, we looked at this. We looked at roads and transit and transportation and sidewalks and bridges. And I don't know if we'd be in a position to say it's enough or you should do this and not that, but certainly a lot is going on. And I was very concerned that we never focused on this particular part of our mission. But now I think if you could provide us with that information, we could get a bigger picture of what is actually going on. And I just want to, again, ask either Shane or Michael if they want to comment on this subject in any way at all, because, I want to make sure that we get other members of the committee have an opportunity. I don't want to hog this conversation. I want to hear from Michael and Shane if they're interested in adding anything to this. Guys?
Yeah,
Shane?
I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Michael, please. No.
Either one of you, one or the other.
I just wanted to point out that I think everything's been touched on pretty well. I have been listening intently, and I think you guys have done a pretty good job of comprehending everything that's been put on the table so far.
Okay, Michael? I know you were on a minute ago.
No, I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, certainly, yes.
So first of all, I just want to say thanks to Juan. It was good to hear from him. This is a subject that's really a lot of interest to me. And I'm just looking forward to learning more about, what projects the city has in the queue, for the Surtax dollars. And I'd be interested to hear more and more about how, the prioritization takes place with the projects and how it fits with, some of the city's planning documents, whether it's the comp plan or some of the other documents that, that have been adopted over the course of the last few years. And to see, how the different projects, are coordinated, and whether or not that they reflect consistent policies with respect to, reducing traffic, to me is, I like to think about in more terms of trying to increase like mode choices and more so than thinking that, we're just going to have everyone driving and somehow make more space for everyone to drive. But, what options are we starting to provide for people so that, they're not so car dependent. So that's with that. So we're just getting started, but that's sort of the things I look forward to learning about.
Great. And to your point, one of those projects in the first 8, and you correct me if I'm wrong on this, Juan, is planning money for the one-way pair on Andrews Avenue and 3rd Avenue, which will be a dedicated bus lane. That's the sort of the local version of the wave. Okay, remember the wave? And so instead of spending $110 million on the trains, you can spend $30 million on a bus pair that will do the same, will provide you with same and better benefits. So I'm glad to see that particular project made it into the very first round of funding. But
so
correct me
on the one-way pair. So it's the city. There'll be one dedicated bus lane in each direction as Andrews and 3rd.
That's Juan.
So essentially the project that was proposed, and this is one of the projects that were that was very beneficial because we got funding for planning, design, and construction of the project. We are in the planning phase now. That's what the Surtax funding is for. It's $195,000 for the first year. And essentially in that planning phase, we're going to hire a consultant to master plan what Andrews Avenue and 3rd Avenue would look like if it was a one-way pairs. So that may include bus transit only lane. It might include new bike lanes and everything like that. But that is the master planning section that we have for that will go to the community and ask what's needed and new connections can be added and everything like that.
Uh-huh. So is it a circulator or is it like existing BCT routes?
It would be a bus transit only lane. So it could be our community shuttle program may use it. It could be BCT routes. It won't create a new transit service. Essentially, it's a dedicated bus only lane. but that is being proposed. That still needs to be master planned and it still needs to be designed before we can get to say, yes, it will have that.
Okay, so it's still very early. Like, we don't know how many lanes are going to end up. Because I'm somewhat fearful of the idea of having 3 or 4 vehicular lanes all moving in the same direction. It seems kind of like a speedway to me, but I guess that's still in the planning process.
Exactly.
Yeah, the initial drawings that we saw, I think it's like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. It was beautiful. It was, a dedicated bus lane, a bike lane, wider sidewalks, trees. It was really a very interesting, and we'll see as it goes along. The other thing in terms of planning, and this is a lot of information to absorb, and a lot more is coming. So we'll be talking again. One of the things I want to focus on is about 2 years ago, there was much talk about a comprehensive traffic and transportation plan for the city of Fort Lauderdale. Mm-hmm. Then it all got caught up in that, that thing that we were doing with the county, and it didn't work out, and we lost our transportation department, and now we built our transportation. So we lost about a year and a half of time that we could have done a comprehensive master plan. Are we still talking about doing a comprehensive traffic and transportation plan for the city? So we got a lot of little pieces here, but I never see the big picture.
Absolutely. So that is one of the things that, especially Karen Warfel, she's heading up our transportation planning team and rebuilding it, as you mentioned, Marilyn. That is one of the biggest things on her priority list as well, in addition to what they're calling an urban mobility plan for our downtown core as a whole. So not even just looking at the entire city, but also looking at the downtown, because that's where most of the trips are happening. And that's where obviously you have most congestion and most crashes and everything like that. So looking at the downtown in specifics as well. None of this is funded. Those are obviously requests that we would have to make, whether through Surtax funding, whether through city general funds, to see where it gets funded first. But that is all under consideration by Karen's team in our planning area.
Well, I know where you can spend some of that $22 million you're not spending on the bridge. Okay, so those are important conversations that we have to have at the commission level. If we're not spending that $22 million there, let's have a comprehensive transportation plan. There's no reason why we can't fund it if we now don't have to spend that money on the bridge. But that's a commission decision. That we don't make policy. We just point out, issues relative to funding. So I'm very confident and not confident. I'm hopeful that this particular piece of our puzzle, of our mission, has now matured to the point where we can look at the information and have something constructive and value added to say to the commission in our recommendations, because it was like a black hole in the beginning of our mandate. Okay, and we have lots of comprehensive plans. We have a bridge master plan, we have sewer master plan, we have seawalls, we never had a comprehensive traffic and transportation plan, street plan, or traffic and transportation plan as one of the pieces of the infrastructure plan of the city. So I'm hopeful to get that. Okay, Peter, anything last on this one? Because we got to move along.
I have a couple of things. The first thing is I would like to make a motion and see if I can get support for the motion or discussion on it. And maybe that motion would go to the commission as a communication. And the motion would be as follows. The ITF requests that the city manager and the city commission use any designated CIP funds that become available as a result of Surtax funding, that those funds be repurposed for other transportation projects, particularly bridges. And I would envision that goes to the commission as a communication, because the budget preparation goes on and the CIP is deliberated on every year. And exactly that point that you were talking about earlier on in this item comes up. So I don't know what you think of that, Chair. It needs a second, obviously.
Do I hear a second so we can have discussion?
Second.
Jerry, okay, discussion. My thought on that is I love it, but I'm not sure that I would say specifically for bridges, because there may be other transportation projects that are equally and maybe even more important. But I like the idea of saying any funds that are freed up because we got funds from the Surtax be redirected to transportation projects. That would be my only concern, to make it specific to the bridge.
I'm happy to amend my motion so that it basically says any transportation projects currently funded via the CIP that where the funding is replaced by obtaining Surtax dollars, that those CIP funds are repurposed for transportation projects. I'm happy.
I love that. That's clean and neat. You like that, Jerry? That's a second?
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion on that one? Hearing none, how about we take a vote? Everybody in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and we'll see by hands raised. 1, 2, 3, 4. Michael and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Michael, would you say yes or no, please? Oh,
yes.
I see his hand. Roosevelt, a yes or a no?
That's a yes.
Okay, that's unanimous. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Juan. I hope this helps you.
Yeah, I have another question for Juan.
Okay.
Who ultimately, when the city submits their projects, who is ultimately making the decision on those projects? Is it the city? Is it the county commission? Who has the final say as to whether Surtax dollars get used for the any city's submitted projects?
I see what you're saying now. Okay, so yeah, so the county commission will be the final signing off authority. It's just like a regular county commission item that will be set forth on your agenda after it has gone through the evaluation and ranking period. There's also a Surtax advisory board, and then it's sent to county commission as it's evaluated and ranked every year. That there's.
I'm aware of the Surtax advisory board. Is their role, does that supplant the MPO, or do they receive information from the MPO and then make a recommendation direct to the county commission?
They receive essentially MPO's evaluated and ranked list. So the MPO does the evaluation and ranking based on their criteria. They provide it to, it's called the municipal program, or the Transportation Surtax Oversight Board. They approve it, and then it's sent to the county commission, placed on their agenda for final approval.
Okay, and then to your mind, just off the top of your head, would funding for a Bright Line tunnel be eligible out of this program? This is like coming from left field. You know, I'm just asking you to hazard a guess.
So it could be. Tunnels and bridges are eligible projects that could be submitted for Surtax funding. Whether they get funded or not, based on their criteria, that is up to the MPO and the county to decide. However, it can be a transportation Surtax project.
Okay, and then I'm just going to make this statement. It's not really a question. You know, when you read this memo, over 30 years, this program will generate nearly $16 billion of funds. So we need to be, whatever we need to do, and obviously the final arbiter appears to be the county commission, but we need to be lobbying for our share of those dollars, because this is a big chunk of money that's going to happen over the next decades.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Jackie, you just joined us again. Did you hear the motion that Peter put on the floor and Jerry seconded? We voted on it. I don't think you were with us at that moment. Were you?
No,
did you hear?
No, I was not. I had to leave where I was and come back to Matt.
That's okay. I appreciate that.
Did you share it with me?
I want to let you know. Peter made a motion that any fund. You want to read it again, Peter? I don't want to.
The motion basically was, Jackie, that any transportation projects that are currently funded in the city's CIP, where they are now funded or will be funded by the Transportation Surtax Fund, that the dollars in the CIP be reused for transportation projects in the city.
Okay, and not
okay,
just
so you're saying that stuff that's already projected, and then we get the Surtax money.
Yeah, for example, Jackie, somebody said, well, these two bridges that we've obtained Surtax money for have now, funded by the CIP. What happens to that money? And what this motion does is it calls on the city manager and the city commission to reuse that capital money for other transportation projects.
I agree with that.
Okay, so we'll add Jackie's name to that resolution, communication. All right, I think we need to move on. We'll revisit this again, I'm sure, when we get that additional information. Perhaps we'll even have Karen come and talk to us about the comprehensive plan and how we can, if we want to, push that forward with the commission. Okay, can you quickly on the agenda? On the agenda, the next thing is the is the Stormwater Master Plan funding alternative or the work plan? Anisha, can you tell me?
Yes, it is. It's the Stormwater Master Plan, and Dr. Gassman is on to speak to that.
Okay, I'm sorry, Nancy. Had I known that was yours, I might have had an opportunity to get you out of here sooner, but please go right ahead.
That's all right. It's always a pleasure to listen to Juan talk. I think the alternative that you're talking about for the city's $200 million Stormwater Master Plan implementation has to do with the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act funding. This is called WIFIA. It is a special funding program out of the EPA. And the opportunity for that program, and I can see that it's on my screen, but it's really small on my screen. If I don't know if everyone else is having that same experience. But the idea is that of that $200 million in funding, the EPA WIFIA program would be able to consider funding $98 million of that $200 million through a special low interest loan. They will allow for a maximum application of 49% of the total project costs. So the idea is that rather than going out to the bond market at a higher interest rate, we may be able to get approximately half of the funding for the Stormwater Master Plan implementation through this EPA WIFIA loan program at a lower closing costs and at a lower interest rate. And then the additional $102 million that would be left, we would go out to the revenue bond market for that additional remainder of the costs.
Okay, and this is something new. This is a program that we didn't know about before, or it just got started. What's the story?
Oh, that's a great question. I believe this program has it started in 2014, and there are other ways that we have funded other allowable costs from this program, but we were invited to apply in this year's funding for WIFIA specifically for the Stormwater Master Planning program.
Great. I mean, I remember when we started many years ago, under the category of grants and grants and other funding sources, there was zero. There was nothing. There was nothing there. And we only had two choices. We either had bonds or enterprise funds or ad valorem taxes. But now apparently we are entering a different era. And I'm assuming that going forward, it's going to be even more opportunities for us to apply for grants and loans and other sources of funding. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so to date, the city has been fairly innovative in the way that it's been addressing the needs of the stormwater program. We have gone through a process of adopting a hybrid methodology, which is something different and new that will generate additional funds. We have moved those costs from the monthly utility bill over to the annual property tax bill. We have started the first 2 of 7 projects using a $70 million line of credit, which we will repay upon getting the bonds for this program. And we've applied to the state for $10 million of that to provide for one of the neighborhoods, potential funding for one of the neighborhoods. So in the end, the city has taken advantage of a number of different financing options and has looked for grant opportunities as well. And the nice thing about grants is that's free money as opposed to a loan, which is money that you have to pay back. So to the point of many of the members of the Infrastructure Task Force Advisory Committee, the $10 million, if we were successful in getting the $10 million grant for the program in the Doers neighborhood, that $10 million that would be freed up out of potentially city dollars would then be reconsidered for additional stormwater related projects.
Good.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go right ahead, Roosevelt.
Just a question for clarification. Earlier we was talking about that second bond issue of the 200 million, and now I'm hearing that half of that can come from EPA and these other sources of funds. Do we know exactly now what we are going to borrow bond-wise in order to meet the expectation of these new neighborhoods?
All right, so Roosevelt, the earlier dollars that were discussed is the second tranche of a $200 million to support water and wastewater. The $200 million that I'm talking about is specific to stormwater. It's a different $200 million. And so the $200 million for the stormwater project, again, half potentially could come from EPA as a loan, the other half from the bond market. And much like the water and wastewater program, the expectation is that in a few years, we will go out for a second $200 million bond for stormwater to deal with the second phase of the stormwater master planning program and pick up another 7 neighborhoods for improvements.
If I could add also, Roosevelt, our finance director and staff there, they have been extremely diligent working with our bond counsel and looking for different opportunities. And so right now, while the second tranche is to come from bond revenues, if there is something else out there, they're definitely going to look forward and provide us with that opportunity.
Thank you so very much. I thank both of you for clearing that up for me. Thank you.
Okay, so my question to you, Nancy, and it's probably not a question, just tell me if I got this right. This is not, we're substituting one amount of, we're not going out for 200 million and then substituting the loan for some of that. We're going out for less than 200 million. We're going out for maybe 100 million, and we're going to do the rest of the $200 million in a loan because it's cheaper money than bond money. Is that the way it works?
That's correct. We need 200 million, and we're using potentially using two different sources to get it.
Okay.
But both have to be paid back over a 30-year time frame.
Okay.
At different interest rates.
Okay. Well, I think that's very creative. And yes, Peter.
So, Madam Chair, Dr. Gassman, there's a couple of neighborhoods that came to the forefront recently that are not on this list. I think it's Melrose Park and Melrose Manors. So if you obtain these advantageous loans and any grants, etc., does it create the opportunity to go into the stormwater bond funds and do projects in those two neighborhoods?
So there's a little bit of a complicated answer to that. As part of our emergency response efforts related to Melrose Park specifically, we have been doing an extensive amount of work to address the concerns in the existing infrastructure in Melrose Park. Our stormwater engineering group is pursuing a design for improvements in Melrose Manors. Melrose Manors was part of the second phase of the Stormwater Master Planning Program, and they would have been included in that program moving forward. But because of the recent events, the design work for that group, for that location, is being accelerated. Is there an opportunity in the $200 million bond? Basically, the answer to that question is not really, but maybe. So let me explain that answer. The current projection for the 7 neighborhoods that are currently designed under the Stormwater Master Plan add up to about $196 million. Should those programs move forward at a cost less than what is currently projected, that would leave money on the table from the bond that we could potentially use to provide improvements in Melrose Manors. If not, it would end up being included either as an opportunity in the next tranche, or we'll have to find money for it from a different source. And so one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that what if we get the grant money for the Doors neighborhood? That would free up a potential of $10 million out of that bond funding that could be directed toward Melrose Manors.
Yes, but also if you obtained a lower interest loan through this program, then you're paying less interest. Would it open the door to enlarging the size of the 200 million so that overall at the bottom line per year, per month, etc., you're only paying the same amount of interest? Does that make sense? You increase the 200 million beyond 200 million, but you still pay the same amount of interest because one part of it you're paying a much lower rate of interest for.
Yeah, that's correct. The challenge in that statement is that we have not done the design work for Melrose Manors, and so currently cannot reasonably predict what the cost of that program is. And so the dollar amount would be a little bit of a stab in the dark in order to determine what that additional cost would be. And you're right, within our current rate, our current rate is designed around bonding $200 million. And so if we end up using other sources of funds that provide for a little less cost, there may be a little bit of room in there. But these neighborhood projects are coming in at a range of $18 million to $37 million. And I don't know that we're going to have enough leftover money in order to address a project of that size without additional funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, this is good. This is good news, and I appreciate you bringing us up to date on this. Anybody have any other questions for Nancy? Anybody? Okay. I want to then move on to the next order of business, and that is the work plan discussion. Am I correct, Anisha? Is that the work plan is the next discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you, Pauline, let me have screen share?
On the bottom of your screen.
I saw it.
Yes, you can go ahead and share.
Okay, here we go. All right, let me give a little bit of background on this. At our last meeting, I put together a proposed outline for a report, a final report or some kind of report, interim, final, whatever you want. And Ralph suggested that instead of looking at our future in terms of the organization of a report, we look at it in the form of a work program, okay? And I did not have the fancy computer software that sets up this what's called Delphi charts, which is that chart where you see in calendar years on the left-hand side all the things that you have done and finished and completed, and on the right-hand side, all the things that need to be done in terms of the times that they need to be done. I did not have that. So I did it the old-fashioned way. I went back and I used actually one of the lists that Ralph had produced in terms of what were the categories of issues that we were going to talk about: potable water, sewers, storm sewers, seawalls, city facilities, those items that are actually in our mission statement, because our mission statement says we are going to review existing infrastructure, including but not limited to roads, sidewalks, airports, seawalls, wastewater distribution, collection, treatment plants, yada, yada, yada. So
Chair, it might be helpful if you put this on page width view to make it a little bit easier to read.
Page width view. View, hang on. View, fit to page.
Yep.
Web outline. Is there a fit to page up here? How about I just zoom out?
Zoom out would be helpful.
Whole page. How about that? Whole page.
No, I think what you want is
that's wrong.
We're only seeing it on half. We're seeing it on. We're seeing both halves of your screen, and we're only seeing the document on one half of your screen.
Okay, hold on. Enter full screen. How's that? And I'm just going to make it bigger. How about I just make it bigger?
And then make it bigger. Yes.
No, it didn't work that way. Bigger.
Go to view at the end.
Yeah.
Go to view. See where it says review? Then go to view. It's to the right.
Oh, it's underneath there. It's underneath there. Okay.
And then go to page width, which is right below view. Page width.
Oh, thank you very much.
That will help people. Thank you.
I appreciate that. All right. So this is what I'm suggesting as a draft work program. And I want to start out by saying we're looking back to March 2017 and we're looking forward to February 2022. That is our lifespan. Okay. You will be surprised how quickly February 2022 is going to come around. And that is the end of our mandate as it is currently described. So what I went to do is I said, let's look at all the things we've done, completed in our work program, and what are the things left to do. And again, this is just my first stab at it. I'm looking forward to comments from the staff because they haven't had a chance to comment on this. And I'm looking forward to your taking this and looking at it and seeing if I got it right, or I left things out, or there's other things that I haven't even considered, because this is done from my recollection. All right. So with that, those caveats in mind, I just want to go through it. In our mission statement, we had a mission to look at the overall funding of infrastructure. So of the items everything in yellow we've already discussed. Now, have we discussed it enough? Is there more discussion that we need to do? But at least we've touched on all of the items in yellow. So for instance, we have already opined on the elimination of the ROI. That was done. It's in the first report. It's over. They don't do it anymore. We have opined on the assessing the stormwater fees for equity and sufficiencies. That was done. Nancy just mentioned that was what was done. When we first started, we were talking about grants, loans, and federal programs, new possibilities for funding. This is the first time we're ever really focused on that because things have changed and there are funds. So that's not in yellow, but it might be. We might think it's enough discussion already on that and might not. But when I wrote this, we had not had this discussion. County Surtax capital budget substitutions, the same thing. We just had that discussion with Juan about, and we actually took action. Peter's communication to the commission speaks to this very specific item on when you get Surtax funds for capital projects that should be used for transportation projects. So we've started to talk about this. This is not in yellow yet. We did talk about, and we have taken positions on the reviewing of the impact fees for water and sewer. That was done. That's all done. They were updated. We've talked about it. I don't think there's anything more that we need to talk about it. We also asked them to do a review of the impact fees for parks, but I haven't seen any action on that. So it's not in yellow. Maybe we want to continue that discussion. We've also gotten input from the public. Those of you who are new to our mission, one of the mission statements is that we should be getting input from the public. And we did do that a couple of years ago. We held some public hearings, and we have had a number of workshops with the commission, which are, of course, public meetings. So we have done some getting input from the public. And there may be other things that I haven't thought about. So that's why every category has others, so that people can add other things. But the commission had asked us specifically for 3 things. These are the only 3 things they've asked us specifically for. And that was to opine upon whether or not a P3 was a good idea for the water treatment replacement plan. And we spent, I think, 2 meetings talking about this and getting information about this. And we ended up sending a recommendation to the commission about whether or not P3 made sense. So that's actually been done. I don't know that we want to revisit it, but we did that. We also sent them our view about whether or not the city should participate in the that's actually C51 allocation for additional water sources. That's done. We did that. We recommended that they participate. So I don't see that there's any need to revisit that. And the last specific thing that they asked us to do was about a moratorium, to opine upon whether or not a moratorium was necessary. That obviously is not in yellow because we're still working on that. And we have, perhaps more things to do on that one going forward before we can get to a recommendation. So those are the general things and the specific things that the commission has asked us to do in our, capacity. And then I broke it up into, as Ralph did, the sub categories of the infrastructure. And let's take, for instance, potable water. The 5-ash water treatment plants, we have CIP funds to keep it going until it's being replaced. I don't think we need to talk about that anymore because we know that we have funds in the CIP to keep it running until it gets replaced. The water supply lines, 2 months ago when we had a presentation, there's a study going on, similar to the study that was being done about the sewer system. That's in progress. So obviously that's not in yellow because we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen the result of that yet. But again, in potable water, we had a presentation about the fire hydrant program. They have a program. It's in place. We had some concerns about whether that program is adequately funded going forward in the operating budget. But unless anybody wants to talk more about fire hydrants and capacity for that, I put it in yellow because we've talked about it and the city has a plan for it. Same thing with the valve program, the exercising of the valves. They now have a program in place. They have a whole team that does that that's their job, is to make sure that's all getting done. Again, that has an impact on the operating budget because they have to keep funding it. You just, you can't stop funding it. It's got to keep going. But I put that in yellow because we've talked about it. And there seems to be a plan going forward. And I'm not sure that we need to talk about it anymore and use our time more effectively. The new water treatment plant. We've talked about that quite a bit. And the last thing that we talked about was we're still waiting for a contract for the consultant to review and implement the plan for the new water treatment. Again, it's not in yellow because we've never seen the plan. And maybe that's something we want to talk about more when the city has that contractor on board. But again, that's just not in yellow in my mind. Could be yellow in your mind, but it's not in my mind because we need to talk about that some more. And so that would be my sort of view of the potable water situation. Again, there's an other here because you all may have some other issues with that system that you are not comfortable with and you want to have more information about that we should be talking about. So that's other. Sewers, okay? The time we spent on sewers is amazing. So we have the gravity sewers. The city has an I&I work program funded by both bond and SIP funds. I don't know that there's much more we can talk about that because they have a plan, the money's there. Is it adequate? Is there enough money? I don't know whether you want to talk more about that, but I put it in yellow. It could be not in yellow if you want to talk about it some more. The force mains, okay? The Hazen and Sawyer work, the updating of the Reese report and the bond funds and the SIP and the bond funds for replacement and rehab. Those two maps, that map that Patricia showed us today, that's part of this whole category. I don't know if we're finished with that one or we want to talk more about it, but when I wrote this, I hadn't seen that map, and so it's not in yellow. So maybe it should be in yellow, maybe it shouldn't, but that's what we need to talk about. And then the pump stations. All right, we have a plan for the pump stations. We're using bond funds for some of them. We're using SIP funds for others of them. Is it enough? Should we be talking about that more? It seems that the pumps are the key thing in the moratorium discussion, because if you remember when we discussed the adequacy reviews, They weren't even looking at the sewage treatment plant. They were looking at whether the pump stations were adequate to move the flow from the new projects into the system. So maybe we need to talk a little bit more about the pump stations. The main line, it's finished. I mean, the bond project is almost complete at the end of July. The whole of the main spine is complete. And I don't think we need to talk about that anymore. You might, but I don't think we need to. Let's talk about this. The new methodology for assessing the stormwater fees, it's done. We did it. It's finished. And now we just talked about the federal loan. Will we go further? Maybe, maybe not, but it's not more money. It's just cheaper money. So me personally, I'd put that in yellow, but you all may have a different view on that. You might want to talk more about that. The treatment plant. Okay, we have SIP funds for the generators and the new injection wells. Actually, you just saw that in the material that Pauline just presented today, that in the next 5-year SIP, we're gonna get funds for the generators and the injection wells. So maybe that comes out and that goes in yellow because it's done. Check, check, check. All right, the asset management plan. The bond funds, we used bond funds to start this work, the asset management plan, which is very important, but we're gonna need continued budget support for that because you just can't do an asset management plan for 2 years. You have to do it every year in order for it to be an effective tool to keep you on top of your maintenance. So maybe we need to talk a little bit more about that. In my view, maybe you don't think so, that's fine. We could cross it off the list. Moving on to storm sewers, all right? Gravity lines replaced. Replacing the gravity lines and relining is in progress. We've been doing that. We have a plan. We're using the bond funds for that. We're using CIP funds. Do we think that it's enough? Are we comfortable that the city has a handle on that? Because every dollar you spend on eliminating I&I is a dollar saved at the treatment plant later on. Okay, which is the next item here is the impact on the treatment plant capacity. I believe they have a plan to test whether or not the I&I is actually working on reducing the impact on the treatment plants. I haven't seen that. That's why I didn't put this in yellow. But if somebody from the staff can come in and say, yes, this is the plan for treating to see if the I&I is working. And if we're reducing the load on the treatment plant, then it goes into yellow and we don't have to talk about it anymore. Okay. We've never talked about outflows into the intercoastal. I don't know if that's of particular interest to anyone and you want to talk about it, but it's very controversial. Every time there's a spill and something gets spilled into the intercoastal, then we get a fine and we have to do mitigation projects. So maybe we want to focus on that little piece of the problem, the outflows of sewage into the intercoastal. Seawalls, I don't think, from my perspective, I don't think we've had a discussion about the seawalls other than Nancy is always here and willing to talk about ongoing projects. But I don't know that we've had a comprehensive discussion on seawalls adequate to make us feel comfortable that we have covered that in our mandate. So I didn't put that in yellow. City facilities. When we started, there was no bond to replace the police station. That was a big issue for us. Okay, well now we have a bond. Now it's moving forward. We don't have to talk about that anymore, do we? I don't think so. Okay, you may, and if you want to keep talking about it, we'll just take the yellow out and we'll schedule another discussion on it. You may recall that the city did a limited study, 40-year study of some of the buildings. I found that very inadequate because it was only about a very small number of buildings and it was a limited, assessment of electrical and plumbing systems. Is the roof broken? Or do we need to repaint? So I don't think we've had a very good discussion about the rest of the city inventory of buildings. So I didn't put it in yellow. Now there's the government center, for instance, the replacing City Hall with the new government center. We have not had any discussion about that. You may not want to have a discussion about that because you may not feel that it's within the scope of our purview. And so we won't talk about it, but I put it down there just to highlight it, that we have not talked about the replacement of City Hall with a new government center at all. So it's not in yellow. Parks, when we started, we didn't have any money for parks, okay? It was a question of where we would use only impact fees for parks. Now we're awash in money for parks. So we don't need to talk about that anymore. I don't think we need to talk about that anymore. Okay, moving on to roads. Again, we have a bridge master plan. Now we have more money to do bridges because we can use Surtax money for the bridges. And that money that we would have spent on the bridges can be used for other transportation projects, a la Peter's communication to the commission. So I don't know how much more we need to talk about that. There is a plan. There now appears to be funding. I don't know whether we should put this in yellow and move on. I don't know. That's for, group discussion. Sidewalks and trails. I don't think we've had a discussion. I know there's a sidewalk master plan, but we have not had a specific discussion about the sidewalks. And now we have some Surtax funding. Apparently we can do some sidewalks. There's this whole issue of the Lauderdale Trail, which is the new mobility issues. And you might want to talk about that going forward. And so I just put down here again, our mission statement to keep us focused. But if you took this, let's say we took this and we worked this out to February 2022, anything that's not in yellow, we should put on the work program between now and 2022 to get it done, or to at least touch on it, so that we could be in a position to say at the end of 2022, February, this is what we looked at and this is what we recommend. So my idea of putting this together for your consideration, it's only for the consideration of the members of the committee. And I would welcome your input on it, and I would welcome the staff's input on it as to whether it was complete or not complete, done or not done. Here's my concern. I don't want to get to February 2022 and be in the position that we were the last time around, where at the last minute, are we going to stay? Are we going to go? How's it going to look? What are we going to do? I would like to get to the city commission in the next 6 months with an analysis of here's what we've done, here's what we need to continue doing, and I'd like to get some input from them. Okay? Have we accomplished our mission? Have we answered all the things that you asked us to answer? And are there new things you want us to answer? But we need to get back with them and find out, have we done our job? Is the job finished? Where do we go from here? So I put that out on the table for discussion, and I see hands up already. And I think the first hand that went up was Jackie. Jackie.
Yeah, I feel like there's obviously a lot more that we need to talk about. But one of the things that I'd like to get resolved and get closure on is this whole moratorium thing.
Okay.
I really think that we need to end that by making a decision. Whatever more information we need to get that to move on. Because when we do, we're going to have more time to get to some of these other things.
So priority-wise, you would go with, let's get the moratorium out of the way.
Right. Let's decide what we're going to recommend and get it done.
Okay. Ralph? Ralph?
Yes. I think there's some items in here, especially on the what you call storm sewer or stormwater, that probably needs a little tweaking as far as no treatment plants. There may be pollution containment structures on the outfalls, but and then there's so there may be some tweaking in here that I think each and every committee member should look through and just look over to see if it's, an item that is accurate. And then secondly, of course, to see if they feel that we've already discussed it sufficiently.
Okay, thank you. And that brings to mind what Michael was saying about mobility. There's nothing in here about mobility, okay? And I don't know if we want to talk about mobility under the category of roads. Where is it? Roads. You notice under the category number 6, roads, I don't have anything down here about mobility. And I think Michael brought it up that he was interested in more focus on mobility, alternative modes of transportation, bike lanes, I didn't put it in there, but Michael, feel free to take this and add to it if those are concerns that you think we should be looking at.
Well, sure. I mean, I just don't know how you separate, roads and mobility. To me, it's all part of the same transportation infrastructure. It's I don't see them as separate, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think that a lot of it involves, reorienting the rights of way. It's a massive public space that has largely, just been dedicated to one mode for years. And, I think that there are lots of people that are interested in reorienting our rights of way. And so, that can involve protected bike lanes. It could involve, more pedestrian elements, the one-way pairs. I mean, all of that stuff, I think, is intertwined under the roads title.
Okay. Well, you can feel free to tweak it any way you want. I just put a little placeholder in here called Mobility Complete Streets Bike Lanes. How's that?
Sure.
Okay. Gerald, you had something you wanted to add?
For me, I don't think we're done until we talk about transportation as a system. We started talking about water as a system and sewers as a system, but transportation still gets discussed in this town, this county, as a list of things.
Okay.
To me, I'm not done until the lights get retimed on Broward and you can make it from the old Starbucks to 95 in a reasonable amount of time. And we stop. And there's a way to get across the river without driving everybody nuts.
Okay. Just an FYI, the timing of the lights is on the county's list of transportation surtax projects. But how about not call it roads, let's call it transportation. How about that? And under transportation, we talk about roads, which is the transportation surtax. Okay, we put roads here. Okay, so we're talking about bridge master plan, CIP funds, transportation, and mobility, all under the rubric of transportation. Would that be better for you? You think that's more complete?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll do it that way. Anybody else?
Yeah, just correct the spelling on transportation.
Certainly, Roosevelt, go right ahead.
Nice catch, Roosevelt.
Chair?
Thank you. Yes, Peter.
So, this is what you've done is an excellent presentation. I thank you on behalf of everybody for all the work you put into that. It's kind of amazing. I'm glad nobody showed me that list when I signed up. When I volunteered. So I'm fine with everything in yellow. I would keep in yellow the sewers because I think they go along with some of the other aspects of sewerage, drainage. So I would keep that as a line item wherever it was.
So the yellow under the gravity lines, replacement reline in progress, you want to continue?
I think that's sewers. Can you go a little higher?
Sure.
Keep going.
Okay.
Maybe gravity sewers. I would leave that in yellow. I would put that in yellow.
You think we've done that? What with the I&I and all?
Well, I'm thinking that they have a relevance to moratorium and capacity and condition and things like that. So we're not necessarily completely done with those.
So it's not going in yellow.
And so the things in yellow we're going to keep discussing, correct?
No, it's just the opposite. The things in yellow we've touched upon them, and
correct.
We have to just yeah. Okay.
So I'm agreeing because you questioned whether that we were done with it, and I agree that should stay in as a work item.
Okay, good enough.
And then and then I also agree with Jackie that we really need to address this question of a moratorium because that was specifically added to our task. I know it's something that the new commission emphasized. So when we get to these remaining things, I think that should be a priority. I did have a comment on transportation, and that's just a general comment for those that are not aware. But the problem with transportation is so much of the important part of transportation for the city is provided and largely under the control of other organizations, specifically the Department of Transportation and Broward County. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't discuss it, but there's always three parties involved, and the city is usually the junior partner on anything major. So that was that. So otherwise, it's excellent. Thank you.
All right. So then from what I'm hearing, our next meeting should be devoted to everything we've talked about, reviewing everything we've talked about so far in relationship to the moratorium, reviewing all the information we've had so far, making sure that we have got all the information we need, and working our way towards a recommendation. Is that generally the sense of the group? That's where our next agenda is? Let's get this knocked out.
I agree with that, Marilyn. I know that, a moratorium is such a serious thing for so many people. And I feel like when the discussion of a moratorium drags on this long, it makes me think, well, we probably really don't need a moratorium, because usually when you need a moratorium, there's all these pressing issues that create that desire. So I'd like to make a decision on it.
Okay. All right. So that's the way I will instruct the staff on the next agenda, is to let's put together and review everything we've talked about so far. And it may take a little time to go. I mean, you have to remind yourself of everything we've done, all the background material that we had. Maybe we have to bring the attorney back and the people from the who do the reviews back again, and focus one meeting just on this. Peter?
So I'm also mindful that we used to have a member that urged us to look at a 30,000 feet level. And I know even before I joined and subsequently, the presentation that went to the commission with financial information as to how things could be funded and what likely costs would be over the next 20 years was very useful. And the people that have been on the ITF for a while may remember this. If you can put the regular Zoom back up, I'm just going to hold this up, because I think towards the end of our tenure, we should update something like I'm going to hold up. And some of you will remember this from 2019. Can you just...
I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
There you go.
Do you remember that, Marilyn?
Yes, I do. It was a nice piece of work.
Yes, and it summarizes over 20 years all the funding needs in various categories. I'm not sure we necessarily need to go further as this did and suggest different funding sources, because some have already been tapped and are already being used. But you see how this basically looks at everything, the funding needs of the city over the next 20 years. So as we wrap up our efforts on your work plan, I would like us to include doing something like this. And for the benefit of staff, I'll send a copy of this to staff and ask them to circulate it to all the members for their information.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. That was we had David to thank for that. He did all that work to put that together. Right. And it was very useful. I think that we should be thinking also, as Jackie had said, let's knock this out. But this is not a 30,000 foot issue. This is a very specific, the moratorium is a specific issue. So I think that we should plan to knock it out, okay, one way or the other. And that what we should do is we should plan on a commission meeting, a city workshop, okay, where we present this recommendation plus a sort of interim report of where we are. now, because if we meet with the commission, let's say in June or July, maybe even June, okay? Let's assume we're in March, April, May. By May, we have made our decision on the moratorium, okay? Let's assume. It takes 2 months. We'll make the decision on the moratorium. If we're planning on having a meeting with the commission in June, we have to say so now because we have to get on an agenda, all right? So if we make it our goal to, in between April and May, to make this decision, and in June, go to the commission with that recommendation, plus some sort of overview of what we've accomplished, what we still are working on, to give them, 6 months to think about what's going to happen in 6 months. Because again, we don't want to have what happened to us, what happened previously, that, you got to the 11th hour and it was a scramble. I mean, the commission may, at the end of February 2022, say thank you for your service, and that's it, and that'll be fine. That'll be absolutely fine. Or they may say thank you individually for your service. We want somebody else. That's fine too.
I think June is a good time period.
Yeah, June's a good time period. Shall we shoot for that, guys?
I'm in agreement.
All right. Well, I think that's about as much as I had hoped to accomplish with this particular item on the agenda. I'm grateful for your support on this, and I think we've got a plan going forward. We got a plan going forward, and I'm comfortable going forward. We may have to revisit it, we may have to revise it, but at least we have a plan going forward. As a planner, I love. Okay, so anybody want to have any additional discussion on this, or can we move on to the next part of our agenda? And we're already at 4:30. So Anisha, item number 6, water and sewer break reports, but we did that.
We did that.
We did not do that. What we talked about is the Hazen, the 2019 Hazen risk analysis with the 2019 breaks. This report, what it provides is the ongoing breaks. And so there's two. There were 2 in for water, and there were none in the month of January for the wastewater side.
Okay. All right. As I'm remembering, we were asking for this in relationship to our discussion about the plan for the water mains. And we wanted to look at this from the perspective of where were the water mains breaking, and were those the plans, were those the areas where the plan was to start prioritizing some of the enterprise funds to fix those water lines. So that was what this was all in relationship to. Did I remember that correctly, Anisha?
No, actually,
no,
from my
sorry.
It was, we wanted to start to take a look at all of the water and sewer breaks collectively on a month-to-month basis. And so what we've been providing you with is, we started just with providing you with a spreadsheet, a chart, and it showed each month how many breaks, but then we added to that this map that shows where those breaks are taking place. And so you only have 2, but then next month you'll see February. And so by the end of the year, like you've seen with the other one, it will have whatever took place for the entire year.
So we do have a similar map for 2020, but it has all of the breaks in 2020.
That is correct. And we looked at that last month.
Okay. So we're making the new map for the same map, but new for 2021.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And the purpose of this map was to be able to
just to keep pace with where those breaks are taking place. And what we've been being able to tell you is, what size water main, or if it was a 16-inch, or if it was a small sewer line. A service line. And so that's all this is providing you with the information of where those breaks are taking place. And so then we can see if there is some, redundancy where pattern. We're starting to see the same, a pattern. If we're starting to see a pattern in a particular area. And so one for water and one for sewer.
And what was the name of the nice gentleman who was working on the water supply sort of master plan? He came and he spoke to us and said, we asked him, is the city doing the same kind of planning work that they did on the on the sewer lines that was part of the consent order? Are we doing what was his name? He's a very nice gentleman.
Who did that report?
That's Rick Johnson.
Rick Johnson.
Rick Johnson.
I don't think it was me.
No, it wasn't Rick. because it would if it was wastewater, it wouldn't have been Rick.
No. I mean water. This is about water. Potable water.
Okay, so if you're asking about water, then it would have been Rick.
Isn't this water distribution force main break? This is water.
It is. But I thought you just said who came and did a report on the wastewater side.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I was not clear. I was talking about the gentleman who came and did the presentation on the water distribution plan that was underway.
Oh, that would be Rick. Yes. I'm sorry.
Right. So,
yes,
and you notice this is not in yellow on the work program because this was an item that he's working on.
Yeah, it's ongoing.
It's ongoing. Okay. Mm-hmm. Very good. All right. Thank you very much for that information. And
one more thing I need to mention to you, it just came to us, is there's a training for board and committee members, a virtual workshop that's going to take place on Tuesday, March 30th at 6:00 p.m. They're asking that any new members or that may want to participate in this, that they need to provide, they need to RSVP by March 22nd with Erica Franceschi, or they can give her a call at 828-5288.
Okay, thank you. All right. I think that concludes the agenda for today. If we have no people from the public who want to speak, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion.
Members to speak?
No, there was nobody.
I was just making sure before we close out that there was no one else holding. Okay.
We good? All right.
Good. We don't need a motion, as Roosevelt told us.
He keeps telling us that we don't need a motion. We can just say, job well done, guys. We made a lot of progress today.
We really did. We really did. Chairman, I'm really loving where we're going. And I think I'm starting to see that we're making some progress. And thank you for putting this plan together, because I really was concerned. And that's why we were having those back and forth emails about just trying to make sure that at the end, we're going to be able to say we've been able to champion all these things and we were able to accomplish a lot, because a lot has been done.
And I want to congratulate the staff on putting up with us and providing all of the information. And I might, yes, thank you so much. Okay, goodbye, everybody. See you next month.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.